So hello and welcome to our first webinar of the year. My name is Sinead McMahon and I am the Content Manager here at the Institute of Early Years Education. Now, because we're at the start of a new year, we felt that it would be quite appropriate to take some time to think about what our intentions are for the year ahead, and also to just explore some ways that we could help to keep for each other focused to enable us to achieve some success and either meet some of the goals that we've set out or maintain the resolutions that we want to do throughout the year. I'm joined today by my colleague Emily Askew. So hello, Emily.
Hello, Sinead.
Now, I know that resolutions and the setting of goals can be quite a personal thing, and that not everybody wants to make them public. I don't feel like you have to answer, Emily, but I'm just wondering, have you outlined any goals or resolutions for this year that you might be happy to share with us?
Yeah, so I always find it quite tricky to find goals that I keep throughout a whole year. So if I'm going to think about those goals, I try to break it down a little bit more into more kind of achievable blocks over a few months, for example, so that I can kind of keep track of things. And one of the ones that I'm aiming for in the next couple of months is to pass my driving test, because it's
Okay.
something that I've been quite anxious about for a long time, and I've moved away from kind of where reliable public transport exists and thought now is the time. I need to kind of get to grips with it. So it's not just about the physical learning to drive aspect, but also for me, it's an emotional kind of getting over my fear and anxiety too. So I've been doing a few lessons each week, and that's been building up so that hopefully I can get to my goal of actually passing at some point this year.
Oh, fantastic. So that's all going well so far then, I take it, yeah?
Touch wood, it
Brilliant.
is, yeah.
Yeah, well done, because it can be difficult sometimes taking the decision to make such a big change. So it sounds like that's a good positive start to it. Um,
Thank you. How
so
about you?
for me, I've been, well, I'll be honest, I have quite a large list of goals, and I often do the same thing every year where I write multiple things, and they're often repeated from the previous year as well. But this year I've really set out to try and read more, so that's one of my resolutions. Um, and so far, so good. That is going quite well. I'm maintaining that one, but yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on because I think that's a bit of my approach to that so far seems to be going well. So yeah, I'll
Brilliant.
elaborate on that in a little bit. Um, so yeah, just thinking about New Year's resolutions. Some of you may have already made your own New Year's resolutions, and in which case, I hope they're going well so far. However, at the time of recording, we are actually 2 weeks into January. So you might already have hit a few challenges or even feel like you've broken that resolution. But that's okay. I think you can reassure yourself that that's totally fine. It's normal. And there's no reason then why you should just abandon that attention and give up. It is still early days into the year, so keep going. You can always pick it up and resume it. But let's just unpick what a resolution actually is. What does that term mean, and why do we make New Year's resolutions? Well, as stated in the Oxford Dictionary, a resolution is a definite decision to do or not to do something.
Mhm.
And New Year's resolutions are used by people all over the world to set goals and create new challenges, often aiming towards personal growth and self-improvement. For many of us, New Year's resolutions can be a positive and helpful tool to guide us into a new year and fresh start, motivating any of those goals that we want to set out to achieve. But for others, resolutions aren't so helpful, and research suggests that it takes on average about 32 days for the average person to break their New Year's resolution. And where a resolution is broken, a feeling of failure can sometimes occur, and that can be detrimental to an individual's self-esteem and confidence. So that's not the effect that we want, really. So why do we go about making New Year's resolutions then? Well, ultimately, a new year brings about the opportunity for that fresh start, which in itself can feel quite motivating. Hope is usually higher where a fresh start occurs, either the start of the week, the month, the school term, or in this case, obviously, the start of a new year. And if we have hope, we have a reason to take action. And where hope is higher, we are more likely to take that action. Now, it's quite typical at the end of the year to reflect on any events that may have occurred throughout it. Many of those events will have been things that were not in our control, things that we didn't initially plan for at the start of that year. So, for example, someone in the family might have taken ill, somebody might have lost their job, or perhaps on a more positive note, there might have been a new baby born into the family, or I don't know, somebody who might have won the lottery. Wouldn't that be amazing? But when it comes to resolutions for the new year, we can't decide to do or not do those things that aren't in our control, but we can make decisions to change those things that are in our control. So, by reflecting on the year that has passed, it can be a really good way to identify any things that you would like to do or stop doing in the coming year that are within your control. And so long as they are managed in the right way with positive intentions, New Year's resolutions can be really helpful to embed changes into the way we go about our daily lives. So it's important to think about how you choose your goals. Whenever you make a resolution or set a new goal, it's important to choose wisely, or else the goal can become ineffective. So think about your motivation. What is the reason for wanting to make a change in the first place? Try to establish how working towards a particular goal is going to impact your life in the long term. For example, if it's a health-based resolution, such as, you want to get fit, why is it that you want to get fit? Is it because you've noticed that some of your clothes are getting tight and you want to fit into them more comfortably? Is it because you're feeling tired and lethargic and you recognise that by engaging in more physical activity, it might help you to feel more energetic? Or is it simply that you say the same thing every year and you think, right, this is what I should be doing, I need to get fit? Now, sometimes we can get a bit carried away with trends, or we can follow what other people are doing rather than changing something because we have a real particular reason to do so. So, for example, in January, I mean, I've just talked about getting fit. Lots of people do that. They sign up for gym memberships or they start eating healthier. It's quite a typical thing. We hear those conversations, we see the special offers in the supermarket, etc. Another thing that's quite commonplace in January is dry January. So where people make the decision to not drink for the whole of the month. Another one is veganuary, to consume only plant-based products in a person's diet. And these are great initiatives to kickstart a new resolution. But it's important that you think carefully about the reasons you are doing it if you do decide to take part in one of those initiatives. Is it because you've seen lots of other people doing it on social media and you kind of feel an obligation that you should join in as well? Or is it because you're doing it because you've got real valid reasons yourself? So going back to dry January, it could be that your resolution is actually to improve your financial affairs this year. And if ordinarily you spend £10 a week, for example, on a nice bottle of wine, well, by engaging in dry January, you're going to be spending less money on alcohol, and therefore you're kick-starting that money-saving habit and you're working towards your goal. It could be, if we think back then about veganuary, it could be that your resolution is to live more sustainably, and in which case, by doing veganuary, you are then working towards that goal. Now, if you don't have a particular reason for working towards a goal, then it loses relevance and you are less likely to be effective or to continue with that goal. And if we just go back to my resolution of saying to you before, Emily, that I, decided I want to read more. If I think about my motivations to do that, I've probably got a few reasons, actually, being honest. So, one of the things for me is I want to improve my sleep. So I've read lots of research that if you read a book before you go to bed, that can really help you and make you sleep more higher quality. Reading is something that I see as a little bit of a treat. It's something that I enjoy. But as a busy mum, sometimes I deny myself that time to immerse and enjoy a book. So actually, by trying to build in a regular habit of reading before bedtime, I'm doing something that I enjoy. So that's good for my own self-care. And then finally, I suppose, like, reading obviously helps me to learn more as well, depending on the type of book it is that I'm reading. And I'm always keen to develop my own knowledge base and to learn more. So reading can help me do that. So I've got some real motivations there associated with that goal. So hopefully, if I keep that in mind, that will help me to continue with my goal. Now, I know, Emily,
Amazing.
you've got some ways to sort of like talk us through some alternative ways that we can plan through the coming year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with ADHD at a later stage in life. So I'd spent a lot of time kind of struggling with the idea of New Year's resolutions because it was something where my focus was very much on one goal. But if it was quite a big goal, I became overwhelmed quite easily with how to kind of take that in a productive step, like Sinead's just been talking about. So it might be something that you want to think about as an alternative way to plan, not necessarily a New Year's resolution, but more as like a goal aimed plan stage, an alternative way to kind of think about your planning as we move into the new year. It's also worth noting that whilst at the new year, just as Sinead said about that sense of hope and that sense of a fresh start, it's something that you can pick up at any time. If you decide actually now isn't the right time for your personal matters, or it might not be the best time for you to start something because of the weather, depending on factors that kind of impact what your goals are, it's perfectly okay to have a New Year's resolution in March. So really thinking about when is the best time for you as well, and not kind of getting wrapped up into a trend that isn't going to benefit you in your best place. So I'd like you to take a moment now just to jot down a few tasks. You don't have to share them with anyone, but specifically tasks that take you less than 2 minutes to do, so 2 minutes or less. It might be something that you do at home. It might be a task at work. It might be something that you complete in between times. Things like putting the cutlery away from the dish rack is something I always really struggle with because there's so many different pieces and kind of putting it in different places. I hate doing it, but in reality, it takes me less than a minute. So take a moment now just to think about those tasks, and think about the small details and activities that take you a snippet of time to complete. Particularly the ones, if you are thinking about the ones that tend to come to mind first, the ones that we really dislike doing. So when you have a look at that list, it's important to kind of highlight those ones that you personally find challenging or are really unmotivated to complete. It might be something that you have, it's more of a difficult task for you in the sense of it's logistical being able to do it. It might just be something that you always tend to put off for one reason or another. For me personally, putting things away that I struggle with quite a lot, where it's kind of, I might be going into a cupboard to get a screwdriver to fix something. And when I open that cupboard and I rummage through and I leave everything out like the toddlers in a playroom, I very rarely go back to it immediately to put it all away because my mind is then on the task that I've needed the screwdriver for. So for me, thinking about that and how I could maybe implement strategies to help with that aspect of the goal, think about why you find it challenging. What is it about that makes it difficult for you to either go back to or to complete and follow through with? It might be that it's something relating to other people, and it might be that you have to wait for someone else to complete something before you can come back to it yourself. But one way to plan and to achieve is to think about these marginal gains that we can make. So marginal gains refer to the small changes you make for a big impact over time. For example, when I'm talking about raiding the cupboards and not putting anything away, if I spend that 2 minutes tidying things back up, it means that next time I go to that cupboard, it's completely organized and I know exactly what I'm looking for when I need to find it. It's also something that you can think about as a 2 minute wonder. So anything that takes less than 2 minutes to do, don't put it on a to-do list, do it immediately, because the time that you take to plan it and to go back to that activity is often longer than the time it will take to do it just immediately. Obviously, there are exceptions to this. If you are, particularly if you are working directly with children, you often don't have those 2 minutes. But it's important to think about the health and safety of your surrounding as well. But on a day-to-day kind of basis, if you need to put the lids back on the pens, do it in that 2 minutes before they go drier because you forget about them half an hour later. And then you have to buy more. So it's really worth thinking about how you can complete those tasks to keep our to-do list really concentrated and purposeful to those bigger tasks. For me personally, it really helps to reduce that feeling of overwhelm because my to-do list is smaller, it's more condensed, and I really have the motivation then to continue because it's not kind of an overwhelming list that I should put to one side and just forget about. But like I say, these things on your to-do list are tending to be the bigger tasks. They're tending to be the goals that you might find more overwhelming in terms of their size. And they could take time to kind of get over them because they're things that either will take longer, they might involve other people's input. It might be something that's not a 2 minute task and is actually something that you need to be thinking about for a much longer period of time. Regardless of its size, you can always break things down. And in this way, you are tackling those much bigger tasks in smaller chunks that are more comprehensible and easier to overcome. It might be that you've got a task of rejuvenating the classroom, and you break that down into looking at different areas and how you can make improvements to those different areas. And over time, you're building that knowledge and you're building the experience of each part to make it easier by the end and to make real improvements by breaking it down, rather than focusing on one big overwhelming task all at once. It's not always about looking forward either. Sometimes it's about reflecting backwards, and that's something that we hold as a real personal value at the Institute, about our reflections to constantly learn. It's important to look at these past experiences to progress. So take time to think about the ways that things have gone really well during the day and stay positive about what you've done well. It might be that you've tried a new method out for a task that you've previously found challenging and it's worked really well, and you can take that forward into your next day. It might be that you've overcome a challenge that you didn't think you were going to, and it's about taking those learning moments as small individual areas and thinking about the objectives that you've overcome to take those new skills forward and continue to be deep and reflective about them, to appreciate that actually at sometimes our resolutions aren't always going to plan. There are setbacks, whether they're in our control or not, but it's about being thoughtful and thinking that you've kind of really held that value and that motivation to continue taking you forward into the next day, whether that means you reflect back on something that you want to take forward or something you'd rather leave behind. So just take a moment now to think about how your day-to-day has gone well. It might be that there is something really small. For me, it was that I went downstairs this morning to make a coffee, and I was able to really do lots of other things at the same time because I'd concentrated and tidied the kitchen the day before. That to me is telling me that I need to plan a lot more, and kind of that time planning last night when I didn't want to was really gone in my favor today. So it's something I'll take forward.
Totally, and I agree. Sorry, I didn't want to. That was one of the things that we were saying about that before, about like going to the cupboard to get the screwdriver out. I remember somebody saying to me once, when you put off those tiny little tasks, think about how your future self will feel
that's
about
what I was just about to say.
Yeah, about you doing it in the first place. So for me, it is things like at bedtime, I can choose to sort of leave the dishes in the sink, or I can put off doing like the children's like lunches for the following morning. But I can't be bothered, but I have to think to myself, right, what will my future self think?
Yeah.
And I know that the following morning, if I come down and there's no dishes in the sink and I don't have to deal with lunches, it makes my day. So it starts off so much more calmly. So that's one thing really helps.
And if you think of the relief that in kind of it's a relatively small task and a relatively small amount of relief. Think about how that would feel on a much bigger task or a much bigger project when it involves other people and you're impacting other people's feelings as well. It's a really good one to kind of reflect about those small changes, but take the sentiment behind it to implement later on into lots of different things.
Yeah. The other thing I was just going to say, when you were saying again, sometimes you just don't put those things away and it's like it builds up. But somebody else said to me, oh, their little mantra is don't put it down, put it away. And I'm really trying to do that, because again, if you just do it in the instant, in that moment, then it doesn't become another task then, does it? So yeah, so that's great. Thank you, Emily. Oh,
absolutely.
Slides on for you.
So, of course, when it comes to those bigger tasks, you might want to be thinking about how you can plan those strategies, because when we're thinking about those much bigger tasks, they are often the more overwhelming. There's lots of different factors to consider. And by breaking it down, you might think that's great. I've got lots of smaller tasks now, but what do I do with them? So one of the strategies you might be thinking about is SMART targets. And they are designed to be, as we'll go through in a minute, really kind of detailed and meticulous in your planning around smaller aspects of a wider goal to help you achieve that objective in a really specific way. So with a SMART goal, and we'll use your example, Sinead, of reading more books, if that's okay, to go through it.
Yeah, of course.
You might want to be thinking about, so obviously, Sinead, you talked earlier about you've got much wider incentives for reading more books. So we're confident in saying that your reading books is just one small aspect of a wider kind of aim and goal of your self-care thinking about maybe wider vocabulary, bits and pieces like that, learning more in lots of different areas. There's loads of different reasons why you might start reading more books. And as an English graduate, I could go on forever about the benefits of it. So I'm not going to. But if you're thinking about reading more books as your target here, you might be thinking, is it specific? So that means, is the goal kind of really clear and you know exactly what will be done because of it? It's specific in that you'd like to read more. That doesn't have to be quantifiable at this stage, but we know that your goal is to read more.
Yeah.
This is where it comes in, the measurable. This is how we identify that progress is being made. So for my driving lessons, for example, it's more of a subjective feeling of me being more confident and how I feel. Whereas for reading more books, it might be that you spend a certain amount of time each night, or you get through a certain amount of pages each night. And it's got that number you can attribute to it to kind of tick off and say, I'm making progress on this.
Yeah, I have been trying to read 10 pages a night. That's been my little goal. And I've achieved it most evenings, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you can kind of, some goals will be more about your personal feelings behind it. And actually it's measurable in a sense of, I feel more confident with this, or I feel less stressed about this. And others will be kind of more quantifiable in, I have run 2 miles today, or I have read 10 pages. But it's also got to be achievable, because one of the things that keeps our motivation is that progress and that building confidence, because we achieve. The more we work, the more it needs to be achievable, because if you're putting all of your effort into something that is really unrealistic, it's going to make us just feel more rubbish about the fact that we're not achieving. So make sure that the goals you set are achievable or within your grasp. This can challenge you a little bit, but make sure that it's not too challenging as to make you feel like a failure if it doesn't work. For example, if I said today that I wanted to run a marathon tomorrow, it wouldn't be very achievable, because I don't think I could run half of one.
Yeah, whereas I guess for me, I have to have the skill of being able to read in the first place to then be able to tackle it, which I have. So yeah,
exactly. And when it comes to your achievable goals as well, remember that it's all very personal to you. There's no one holding that to you as kind of letter of the law. So for example, if you're Sinead, if you have a really busy day at work and you know that it's not going to be achievable to read 10 pages, but you might just read 3. And you're setting that goal to your limits of that day, depending on how you feel. It doesn't always have to be the same.
Yeah.
But also that it's relevant. So making sure that this goal within this SMART target aligns with your wider aims. So if your wider aims are to learn more about a certain topic, and part of that is to read more about it, make sure that the book aligns with the thing that you're looking to learn more about. And finally, that it's time bound. So having a kind of deadline. For some people, a deadline can be really stressful in the sense that you think, oh, I've only got 2 days to write a 10,000 word essay. Or it can be held really well as being, I've got 2 days, so I start now, and this is how I plan my time. Obviously, that's quite an extreme example. But if you're able to put a time bound on reading a book, Sinead, and say, actually, this book is 300 pages, and I am aiming to read 10 pages a day, but with a little bit of leeway for those days where I'm not feeling so good. And for those days where I might read more, I'm going to give myself 34 days.
Okay.
And then so at those 34 days, that's kind of that time-bound area. It might be one good way of thinking about that is if you borrow a book from the library, they often give you 3 weeks with the option to extend if you need to, but there is that date bound to it that you have to kind of
So you can set off with that initial intention, I want to finish this before I have to take it back, but you do know that the option's there to renew it if you can. Well, and again, and I think actually the time balance side is useful for me anyway. I find it as a useful strategy. My goal, I'm just putting it out there, Emily, so you can keep me on task as well, is to try and read my book to finish it by the end of January. And so far, I'm we're on the 16th, and I am halfway through. So at the moment, I'm on track. And actually, I think sometimes, I know I'm sharing that with you. You can literally keep checking in on me, but I think it's helpful sometimes to have a partner that you can work with as well, to share that goal with, for an element of accountability, but without adding the pressure as well. Like you say, if we go back to achievable, it's about it being achievable and manageable, but not being stressful. So I'm sharing that one with you. You can tap in with me at the end of January and ask me how I'm getting on. But yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Emily. So we'll move on. And just again, I thought this might be a good opportunity to remind remind any of our members of some of the tools that we've got that can help you to achieve your goal. So perhaps if your goal is aligned with developing your own personal knowledge or your skill set, just to remind you that obviously we've got all those resources, our early learning resources can really help with that. We've even got the resource there, which is about developing resilience. So articles like that can be really helpful if it is about a personal goal for you that you are working towards. It could be that if you are developing the idea further and you are thinking more long term about developing your career progression, it could be that you make use of our career pathways resources as well. So again, take a little look at those. We mentioned those SMART goals just then, and I think as well one of those things is being able to measure your success. And I think the CPD tracker can really help members to do that. So if you are engaging with a piece of content, log the CPD, see how that wheel develops, and also use it as a time. You talked Emily about reflecting on things that you've done already, so there's that opportunity there to have reflections and log how you feel about a piece of content, what your current practice is, and then revisit it in a few months' time and think, well, actually, has my practice changed as a result of engaging with some of that content? So the CPD tool can really help you with that. Again, we know that lots of goals at the start of the year are usually, many of them are aligned with health and fitness routines. So we have got all of those resources that you can access on Spectrum Life, the digital gym, the nutrition guidance, recipes, all of those different things. If it's about mental health and well-being, there's the Be Calm collection of resources, which are, lots of meditations and mindfulness tasks and things there. And there's lots of different webinars that can help you for things like a whole host of things, from planning your finances, better budgeting and things like that. And obviously if budgeting or finance is important to you, we do also have access to the discounts and rewards and the benefits hub as well. So that could be something that's worth exploring. But if you are still stuck for ideas on goals or resolutions as well, we've also got the forum. I know I mentioned about accountability, so get some conversations going about what your targets are, what your goals are. You don't know, you might be able to offer a little bit of encouragement to another member that can really help them, and likewise they might be able to help you as well. So do explore some of those tools and you hopefully will find them useful.
Amazing. Sorry, Sinead, I was just
No, it's okay.
I was just going to say that following on from that, obviously today's webinar does count as CPD towards your goals because you're thinking about them, which is a huge step in the right direction. Whether you've got goals already or you're looking to kind of make those changes and think about them as we go on through the month, like I say, just because you haven't done it on the 1st of January doesn't mean it can't happen. So remember to log your CPD points for this session. Maybe you might use the short reflection task to think about the goals that you either have set or are looking to set, or maybe just one change that you'll make towards having those ideas in the future. If you're not yet a member, you can sign up today with our 1 month free trial to explore all of these benefits, as well as being able to view those past webinar recordings and to have an explore of all the healthy lifestyle and member resource benefits too. Do join us for our next webinar. Don't forget to book your place. It's taking place on the 29th of January at the same time, 12 o'clock. And it will be thinking all about how we can slow down our interactions with children and explore how that can really benefit our learning and development and also our professional sense of self too.
And again, as ever, I know we made reference there to the forum as well. You can, you are welcome as a member to share your thoughts and experiences with other like-minded professionals in our member exclusive forum. So yeah, get some conversations going about your resolutions and your goals for the year ahead. But all that's left for me today to say now is just a huge thank you for joining us and watching today. We do hope you found it helpful.